What if the greatest art crime of the century didn't involve a single forged painting? Just one man who knew too much, and another who trusted too easily. Behind closed doors in vaults worth billions, two powerful figures collided in a silent war over truth, money, and control. This isn't fiction. It happened, and it changed the art world forever. Welcome to Red Dossier.
Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.
In the elite world of high-end art, where transactions happen behind closed doors and a painting can be worth more than an island, one of the most shocking disputes of the 21st century unfolded quietly, but with seismic consequences. At the heart of it were two men, Yves Bouvier, a Swiss Freeport magnate and art broker with a genius for staying invisible, and Dmitry Rybolovlev, a Russian oligarch whose fortune came from fertilizer, but whose ambitions turned to art. Yves Bouvier was once celebrated as a visionary who revolutionized the logistics of art ownership. He didn't just sell paintings. He stored them in tax-free warehouses in Geneva and Singapore, moved them across borders with surgical precision, and understood how to protect the anonymity of the world's richest collectors. But that discretion became his weapon. Accused of inflating art prices and deceiving clients, Bouvier now stands at the center of a legal and ethical firestorm spanning Monaco, Switzerland, Singapore, and the United States. Dmitry Rybolovlev was no innocent newcomer to power. A billionaire molded by post-Soviet capitalism, he acquired state assets, survived Russia's chaotic privatization era, and emerged with a vast empire. When he entered the art world, he didn't come to play. Over 10 years, he spent over $2 billion on masterpieces, from Modigliani to Da Vinci. But instead of navigating the complex, opaque art market himself, he entrusted Bouvier to act as his personal art advisor. According to court filings and investigative reports, Bouvier exploited the asymmetry of information. He wasn't merely connecting buyers and sellers, he was quietly purchasing works himself, then flipping them to Rybolovlev at massive markups, sometimes doubling or tripling the original price. One example, Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, which Bouvier acquired for $83 million and resold to Rybolovlev for $127.5 million. The painting would later go on to sell for $450 million at auction. But that's not where the real story lies. From a criminological perspective, Bouvier fits the profile of a white-collar manipulator, a figure who operates in the gray zones of legality, exploiting gaps in regulation and leveraging trust as capital. His tactics didn't involve forgery or theft in the traditional sense. He used legal structures, offshore companies, opaque invoicing, and undisclosed commissions to shift financial value invisibly. His power lay in knowing more than everyone else in the room, including the billionaire paying him. Rybolovlev, by contrast, exemplifies what scholars call a high-trust victim in elite crime. Wealthy, powerful, yet unequipped to assess risk, in unfamiliar territory. Despite his success in industry and finance, he lacked fluency in the codes and power dynamics of the art world. That vulnerability, combined with his reliance on a single, unregulated intermediary, made him the perfect target in a market governed more by relationships and secrets than transparency and law. Both men were shaped by their environments. Bouvier came from a middle-class Swiss background and inherited a small art shipping company. He mastered the art of discretion and built an empire out of warehouses and loopholes. Rybolovlev rose from the chaotic capitalism of 1990s Russia, where fortunes were made by moving fast and trusting few. Ironically, it was that very distrust of outsiders that led him to put all his faith in one insider. As the two men collided, their conflict exposed something far larger than a private feud. It revealed a market operating with minimal oversight, where billion-dollar transactions can occur without public records, and where trust is a currency as volatile as any asset. This isn't just a story of deception. It's a warning about what happens when power is matched not by knowledge, but by presumption. What seemed like a private art deal soon became a global legal saga. And as we'll see in the next part, this wasn't just about paintings. It was about method, motive, and manipulation on a scale that few ever imagined possible. To understand how this scandal unraveled, we must first understand how it was built. Yves Bouvier didn't just take advantage of Dmitry Rybolovlev's trust. He engineered an entire business model around information asymmetry. Using a web of offshore entities and tax-free storage zones, he created a system where the movement, pricing, and ownership of art could remain invisible even to the buyer. In criminology, this aligns with the concept of structural opacity, a condition where legal and financial infrastructure is intentionally layered to obscure visibility, accountability, and traceability. Bouvier's system was perfectly opaque. He purchased paintings through intermediaries, funneled them through shell companies in Hong Kong and the British Virgin Islands, and presented Rybolovlev with final sale prices that omitted the original purchase cost entirely. Over the span of roughly a decade, Bouvier sold Rybolovlev 38 artworks, including pieces by Rothko, Gauguin, Matisse, and Leonardo da Vinci. Court documents and investigative reports estimate that Bouvier overcharged him by $1 billion USD in total. One of the most infamous transactions involved Gustav Klimt's Wasserschlangenthrough, which Bouvier allegedly bought for $112 million and sold to Rybolovlev for $183.8 million, a markup of over $70 million in a single deal. Bouvier claimed he was acting as a dealer, free to set prices. Rybolovlev believed Bouvier was his trusted advisor working on commission. This discrepancy of roles, broker versus principal, lies at the core of the legal battle. In jurisdictions like Monaco and Switzerland, legal interpretation depends heavily on contractual wording and fiduciary expectations. Bouvier exploited that ambiguity. What he did wasn't obviously illegal in every country, but it skirted the edge of civil fraud and breached implied trust. In legal terms, this falls under the category of fraude à la commission in French civil law, fraud through concealed self-dealing. In the US, a comparable charge would be constructive fraud, where there is no direct lie, but the concealment of critical information leads to unfair enrichment. From a psychological standpoint, Bouvier exhibits traits often associated with high-functioning economic offenders. Strategic cognition, compartmentalization, lack of remorse, and control over emotional signaling. He operated not with brute force, but with confidence, discretion, and precision. He was a confidence man, not in the pejorative sense, but literally. He won and exploited confidence. Rybolovlev, meanwhile, presents a different psychological profile. He's cautious, reclusive, and calculated, but in unfamiliar domains, he deferred entirely to perceived experts. This made him susceptible to what's known in white-collar crime theory as the halo effect, the belief that success or credibility in one domain, here Bouvier's role in the art world, translates to trustworthiness in all others. The art market itself enabled the deception. Unlike regulated financial markets, the high-end art world operates with minimal disclosure obligations. Prices are not transparent. Provenance is rarely public, and offshore storage facilities like Bouvier's Geneva Freeport offer wealthy individuals a way to hold assets invisibly. According to a 2018 report by the European Parliament, the Geneva Freeport alone was estimated to contain art and collectibles worth over $100 billion, much of it shielded from tax authorities. So how did it unravel? Ironically, Rybolovlev's awakening came not through suspicion, but through repeated patterns. He began to notice discrepancies in valuations. When he hired independent art advisors to audit his collection, the truth emerged. The prices he'd paid were grossly inflated. What followed was a series of strategic legal moves. Rybolovlev built a case not just in one country, but across several jurisdictions: Monaco, Singapore, Switzerland, and the United States, coordinating with international law firms, forensic accountants, and investigators. Bouvier was first arrested in Monaco in February 2015, but quickly released. Legal challenges ensued across continents, with conflicting rulings. Courts in Monaco moved to prosecute, while a Swiss tribunal later dismissed key elements of the case. As of the latest reports, several cases remain active, while others have been settled or dismissed. The fallout rippled far beyond two men. Major auction houses began to revise due diligence procedures. The United States introduced amendments to anti-money laundering laws targeting the art trade. The global market was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. The same qualities that make art valuable, scarcity, mystique, subjectivity, also make it perfect for manipulation. Bouvier wasn't caught because he made a mistake in hiding his tracks. He was caught because the person he misled had the resources and motivation to pursue him across borders. That in itself is rare. As criminologists point out, most elite fraud goes unpunished, not because it's undetectable, but because few victims can afford to fight back. By the time the courts became involved, the damage had already been done. What was once framed as a betrayal between two men had become a case study in systemic vulnerability. The fallout of the Bouvier-Rybolovlev saga cannot be measured solely in lawsuits or lost millions. What unraveled was not just a web of inflated prices, but a global structure that allowed secrecy to flourish where scrutiny should have ruled. In the world of elite crime, this case is unique, not because of its violence, but because of its silence, scale, and the audacity of what was hidden in plain sight. Yves Bouvier was never criminally convicted, but the cost to his reputation and empire was catastrophic. He lost key business partnerships, withdrew from his Geneva Freeport leadership role, and became a symbol of unchecked power in the global art trade. Though he defended his actions as standard business practice, multiple courts found grounds to proceed with charges related to fraud, breach of trust, and unjust enrichment. His defense rested on the technical ambiguity of his role. Not a fiduciary, he claimed, but an independent dealer. That distinction, once considered trivial, has since been scrutinized by international regulators. Dmitry Rybolovlev, for his part, emerged not as a hero, but as a cautionary figure. He recovered some of the financial losses through settlements, but not before enduring public trials, counter-investigations, and questions about his own ethical conduct. He had used political connections in Monaco to push his case, a move that triggered its own scandal, known as the Monaco Gate affair. In it, senior officials were accused of favoritism toward Rybolovlev, complicating the moral clarity of his victimhood. From a comparative criminological perspective, both men expose fundamental weaknesses in how cross-border financial crime is pursued and prevented. Unlike drug cartels or arms dealers, neither Bouvier nor Rybolovlev operated through violence. Yet the amounts involved rivaled operations led by figures like Pablo Escobar or Felix Gallardo. Where those figures trafficked in narcotics, Bouvier trafficked in paintings, and in both cases, the real commodity was control over markets that resist regulation. Art crime, as defined by the FBI and INTERPOL, includes theft, forgery, and illicit trafficking. But this case demonstrated a fourth category: value manipulation through strategic opacity. The art was real, the sales were legal, the deception lay in what was never disclosed. As one financial crimes investigator remarked, "It's not what was done illegally that's most dangerous. It's what was done legally, but in bad faith." The legacy is legislative as much as it is cultural. In 2021, the US passed the Anti-Money Laundering Act, expanding oversight to include antiquities and art dealers. The EU tightened regulations on art transactions over €10,000. Free ports in Geneva, Luxembourg, and Singapore have since faced mounting pressure to increase transparency. What once operated in the shadows is now under light, at least partially. Psychologically, the saga also redefined how trust functions in elite financial crime. Bouvier weaponized credibility, Rybolovlev overextended it. In criminological terms, it was a textbook case of relational fraud, where deception occurs not by breaking trust, but by appearing too trustworthy to question. When comparing the two men directly, the contrast is sharp. Both engaged in high-stakes dealings with minimal oversight, but Bouvier held the informational advantage, using it to orchestrate prices, while Rybolovlev controlled the capital but lacked domain expertise. Bouvier was proactive and manipulative, leveraging complexity to obscure intentions. Rybolovlev was reactive and emotionally driven, launching legal battles after realizing the extent of the betrayal. Bouvier's strategy was calculated deception. Rybolovlev's flaw was concentrated trust, and yet neither fits neatly into the conventional image of a criminal. That's precisely what makes their story so unsettling. It suggests that in certain markets, the boundary between business and betrayal is not moral, but contractual. And if the contract allows it, or fails to forbid it, exploitation becomes indistinguishable from enterprise. The question that lingers is not just whether a crime occurred, but whether it was ever preventable. Could stronger regulation have stopped it? Could better due diligence have changed the outcome? Or does this case reveal a deeper, structural truth about how value is created and extracted in elite global systems? As this story fades from headlines, but remains etched in legal textbooks and economic policy reports, one thing is clear. The most dangerous crimes are not always the ones that break laws. Sometimes they're the ones that rewrite the rules, quietly, efficiently, and with a smile. In a world where trust can be weaponized and billion-dollar deals are made in whispers, are we really watching a crime or just the evolution of power? Was Yves Bouvier a con artist or simply a smarter capitalist? And did Dmitry Rybolovlev lose because he was naive or because he played by rules that no longer apply? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this fraud or just business as usual? If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We've got more series where this one came from. This is Red Dossier, and the truth is never black and white.